Another episode of Done Dissertation Office Hours. I'm your host, Dr. Ramon Goings, founder of Done Dissertation, where we demystify the dissertation process so that doctoral students can write and defend a dissertation in 1 year or less. In today's episode, we're going to talk about and answer all of your top questions about the literature review. We've been collecting questions over the last week, and so I'm going to go through some of the questions that folks had submitted, and then we're just going to open up for Q&A because I know a lot of students struggle with the literature review. It holds a lot of folks up from just finishing their dissertation proposals, and I want to give you some strategy and insight on how to do it so that you leave the process not feeling confused about the literature review. It's just shocking that everyone always seems to be very confused. So I want to make sure we clear that up in this video. For those who don't know me, again, I'm Dr. Ramon Goings at Done Dissertation, where we support doctoral students. And this episode of Done Dissertation Office Hours is sponsored by the Done Dissertation Velocity Group Coaching Program. It is a 4-month group coaching experience with the goal of helping the doctoral student get to the dissertation proposal defense or final defense within the next 4 months. If you are interested in learning more, I want you to visit www.velocitydissertation.com. It's good to see everybody tuning in. And before we get started, if you let me know in the comments, where are folks coming from? Just let me know who you are, where you're coming from, and where you are in the process currently, just so we can kind of build community and stay connected with one another. And again, it's good to see you. I see Alicia. I see you on Instagram. Good to see you. I hope all is well. And again, we're going to go ahead and get started. All things literature review today. So if you got your questions about the literature review, also start populating those in the comments, because once I finish with the questions that were submitted to me, I'm going to go ahead and just open up and start answering the questions that you have. So definitely stay tuned. If you drop your question, stay on, because I will make sure I answer everyone's question this evening before I jump off. And so just to give you all a little backstory, I actually did not like writing a literature review at first when I was a doctoral student. I thought it was very confusing. I just didn't understand how it all worked. And I felt like it was just so mysterious. And I just kept getting frustrated. I know my first time writing a literature review was for one of my first classes. And y'all know when you have those doc classes, the last, assignment, and usually those classes is to write some form of literature review. And I could have sworn, like I learned in undergrad, even my master's program, I thought writing a literature review was just about, writing about what other people talked about. I didn't understand that you can insert yourself into the conversation and that you can actually kind of present a narrative on the literature based on what's going on and what the arguments have been. And it wasn't until I got very well into my doctoral program that I had to figure it out. And then it finally clicked. And at that point, I became to actually love literature reviews. And now when you have an idea of how to write literature reviews, it becomes very easy to learn new research areas, because it's the same process that you do for your dissertation research. It's the same process over and over and over again to learn new areas of research. And again, I love writing literature reviews and helping doctoral students do the same. Folks in my Velocity Group Coaching Program know the deal. We're always talking about how to write literature reviews and just how to become a better writer. And so again, today I want to talk about some insights and strategies from folks and questions I've been getting about how to write the literature review. So let's get started. So simply, and somebody asked, it was very fair, like, what is the literature review anyway? Like, the question was just, what is the literature review? And I think that is important for us to start with, because a lot of us have, probably had the same insight that I had about what the literature review was, and gotten very confused and very frustrated because we didn't understand what was really happening and what was really going on with the literature review. So just at its core, right, the literature review is for you to showcase as a scholar that you have a firm understanding of as what has been done on your topic, and also what has been the scholarly conversation happening in your area for a certain period of time. Depending on your research topic and maybe idea, what construct you put together, there will be more or less literature available. So, and the time horizon will be different. So a lot of us who might be using like self-efficacy and things like that have been studied a lot by a lot of different people and a lot of different disciplines. And so there's so much, there's a large body of knowledge, to where some of us who are doing other types of work maybe have a very small niche area to kind of start with. But yeah, first things first is that you have to show that you understand what the topic, what your topic has been about, what scholars discussed. And I always say there's 3 things that if your literature review is done well, at the end of it, your chair, your reader, committee, whoever it is, should understand these 3 things from reading your literature review. We should know first who the scholars are that are leaders on your dissertation topic. That's essential. You got to be able to showcase that. So if you're writing about the topic and you don't cite the top scholars, something's wrong there. So, that's number 1. Second is that you have to be able to showcase what those scholars, what their work has done, or what they've done in their work, what has been the arguments that they've had in this area. So some scholars have been arguing with each other about particular topics. So if there is a disagreement about what's happening in the literature, you got to be able, as the researcher, to understand what's going on and bring everything together and create a coherent conversation and coherent argument based on what all these scholars have been doing over a period of time. And then while you're looking at what those arguments and disagreements and what the literature and what these scholars have been talking about, then you got to be able within this to put show where the gap is, right? So it's not a sense of just showing what the arguments have been, saying scholar camp A talked about it in this way, scholar B talked about it in this way. That's a part of the literature review. But the last part you got to think about is like within those scholarly debates and arguments, where is the gap? What is missing from that conversation? And then lastly, right, when you do those first two things, when you do that well, then it positions you lastly to then show how your dissertation research is contributing to the literature in a unique way. Once you do that, it becomes so easy to make the case as to why your topic is needed. And a lot of students sometimes do number one, where they know who the key scholars are. Sometimes they do number two, where you start to showcase what has been done in your area, what are the key arguments, and you start to show where the gap is, right? You start to do it. Sometimes we don't do it more explicit enough, and then it's a little bit off-putting. And so your chair doesn't always know where you're going with this. And then a lot of times I see students where they get caught up in the literature review and being stuck in the dissertation is because the third part, they're not able to show how their study fills a gap. That is key. So again, that is the purpose and thought behind the literature review, is to really showcase what has been done, because your job is to then say, hey, based on what's been done, I now want to introduce this particular area that's unique in what I want to present and add to the conversation. And again, I think that is really, really important to getting through the doctoral journey. And so again, that was the first question that was submitted. Essentially, what is the literature review? And shout out to Ken, who is checking in from Austin, Texas. The ABD is focused on chapter 1 and 4 and 5 completed. Hope to defend in December. Congratulations, Ken. Looking forward to hearing the successful news about your defense. And again, for those who are just tuning in, Dr. Ramon Goings, founder of Done Dissertation. And in this video, we're going to talk about your top questions related to the literature review. So if you have questions, regardless of whatever platform you are, drop them in the comments. I'll make sure that I answer them. And again, this episode of the Done Dissertation Office Hours is sponsored by the Velocity Group Coaching Program. It is Done Dissertation's 4-month group coaching experience with the goal of helping doctoral students write and defend either their dissertation proposal or their final dissertation in the next 4 months. So if you're ready to get your dissertation done and tired of being stuck, I invite you to submit your application. You can go to www.velocitydissertation.com to learn more about the program and to submit your application. So with that said, first things first, I had to talk about, what exactly is a literature review, because I think that's important. The second question I get, and this is kind of a combo question, and it was for a couple of people, and I get this question all the time, so I wanted to bring it up because I think it's something we got to talk about. The next question is, how many pages should my literature review be? And how many references should I include? And I gotta keep it real with y'all on this. And I will never sugarcoat anything, but these are the wrong questions to actually ask. Because what happens is, right, when you ask this type of question to your chair, it's like you're worried about the wrong things. Like the page count, your chair, and 95% of the case is gonna say it depends. Some universities have a very structured where it's like, oh, we want at least 30 pages. Some do that, but many do not. And it's going to be, your chair's going to be, well, it depends. And it really will, based on what topic you're studying, how much has been written, what do you need to cover, especially if you have different bodies of literature that you're trying to bring together. It's really going to depend. So don't go in this thinking that there's one, answer to that question. And this is something I think we need to consider. And it's a breezy way says this is right on time because I'm editing my literature review now for my perspectives. Perfect. So I'm glad that this is right on time. And again, it doesn't matter. Page count is irrelevant. References are irrelevant. Here's why, because I could tell you that you need to have 30 references, right? But if you don't do a good job actually surveying the literature and putting that scholarly conversation together, it doesn't even matter. So that's why I say that is actually the wrong question to focus on. Your goal, again, should be to really showcase and be able to map out all the areas that are relevant to your topic. And I think having that conversation with your chair is a better conversation than to ask them, well, how many pages should I be writing? How many references? Like, y'all, don't go into it, the number count, and trying to quantity. All right, I need 15 references. So I'm going to find 15 documents, in the literature, and I'm going to cite only those 15. It's gonna be a mess. And I've seen it happen so many times, because what ends up happening in your literature review, it reads like this. There is not a lot written on my topic. Scholar A found in their quantitative study that such and such, such and such. In study number 2, this author found such and such and such and such. Study number 3, such and such and such and such. It'll be this long laundry list of just almost reads like an annotated bibliography. And you don't want that. That is not what you need to do with your literature review. This is why I say that these are not the right questions to ask. So for those of you who are tuning in, if you watch this on replay, just know that from now on, you don't ask those questions about how long this should be. Maybe that question you could just ask and just passing, like, how long should this be? But don't like put it like, oh, if they say 20 pages, I'm going to do exactly 20 pages. Do enough to exhaust the literature. Like, I want y'all to be scholars. And there, again, I've talked about this before, but a lot of doctoral students want to be done. And some of them say they want to be a scholar, but they'd rather be done more than be a scholar. And I think when you want to be a scholar, you'll do what you need to do to really do a great job with your work. For people who just want to be done, they'll do what people who just want to be done do, and that's the bare minimum. And so when it says 20 references or 20 pages, they'll just earmark, all right, I got to get to 20, and they'll just keep an eye on that, versus like, hey, let me just exhaust what I can about my topic in the literature and see where I end up. I think it's a better approach and a better mindset in order to write your literature review. And again, I think about the literature review, I always give this party analogy, right? And I always say that, think about the literature review as, say for instance, you go to a party, you're invited to a party by one of your friends. And when you get to this party, there's only be one person that you know. So when you get to this party, you show up late. So the party started maybe an hour in, you show up late. And then when you get to the party, you come in the door. And first things most people would do is, look around, see like, what's the vibe in here? What's going on? And a lot, and this is what you do initially when you're like reading literature. You're trying to see what's the landscape, what's going on. So when we're at this party, you walk in, you see what's going on. You're looking for your friend. You're looking around, but then you notice, you say, oh, there goes my friend. They're over there in the corner with like 5 or 6 other people. And then you start to walk towards them. And so on that walk, as a researcher, what's happening is that you've been looking up the literature. You start to get an understanding of where your direction needs to go in terms of your dissertation. And then you start to specifically focus on a particular area in a body of knowledge, right? And you're on that journey, you're on that walk. And so now we're coming back to the party. You're on that walk. Your friends over there, 5 or 6 friends, and with 5 or 6 of their friends in the corner, you pull up to them, right? People in the social setting, depending on how you are, some people would just barge into the conversation, introduce themselves, interrupt what was happening, the vibe that was going on in that corner of 5 or 6. But what we do as scholars is that first things first, we got to listen to what the conversation is going on right now. And that's what you're doing in a literature review. You're trying to understand and then show what's been going on, because the hopes is, and like what you would do at a party, right? At some point, you want to insert yourself into the group and talk to them about what they've been talking about, just like you would do in your literature review. You want to insert yourself and talk about the research that's been talked about. And then lastly, the shift that you make is that not only you want to talk about what they've been talking about, but then you want to change the conversation. And that's the goal with the literature review, to change the conversation and really say, hey, y'all been talking about this for a while. This connects to this particular thing, and I want to shift the conversation to something else. You all are in the process of shifting the conversation, and the literature review allows you to do that, because first you got to understand what the landscape is, and then you're able to better address the body of work. So that is the process. A lot of you all stop when you ask these type of questions about how many pages I should be and how many references I should include. You all haven't even gotten in. You all still looking around to see if your friend is in the room. Y'all haven't even started to take that walk to go towards this, your group of friends and your new group that you're going to enter. So again, I think this is really important. And for those of you tuning in, don't ask those questions anymore. Y'all heard it here first. I want to give y'all the insight and make the mistake, and so you don't make the mistakes that I've made, and you all get it straight from there. And again, Tequila, I see you have a question. I'm going to address that in a second. And I'm glad that the analogy, someone mentioned that the analogy is gold. Yeah, it's really a scholarly conversation. You got to think about it like that. A lot of us go in just to, we all want to start our own conversation off on the side. And how that works in research is like, you got to join somebody else's conversation to then pull the people towards where your conversation is going, and you become the center of the discussion. That's the goal. At the end of the dissertation, you're hoping to have created a whole new group and then maybe another side of the room. That's the goal with all this. And actually, Tequila, your question is exactly the next question I was going to bring up in a different format, but it gets to the same thing. And so Tequila asks a great question on LinkedIn. She says, is there a best practice to how we arrange or structure the literature review by author, variables, etc.? That is a great question. I get a lot of questions about formatting a lot and structure. There is no right or wrong way. What you have to do is to figure out what is the best way that I can tell this story. Or think about it from the conversation analogy. What's the best way I can tell others about what was happening in that conversation in the corner with my one friend and 5 or 6 of their friends? It can go a number of ways. So for folks, when you're doing quantitative research, I see a lot of quantitative study dissertations that are organized by variable. And sometimes that makes sense because you want to, survey the body of research on a particular variable to make the case as to why that variable is important to your study. That's one way to do it. I don't see folks, typically in the social sciences. So sometimes in humanities, it could look different. But in the social sciences, I typically don't see literature reviews organized by author. Here's why. When you go by author, it often starts to read like an annotated bibliography, and it says like, and Tequila, I'm usually like Dr. Monroe in 2022 said blah, 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 blah. Oh, then Dr. Monroe in 2018 said blah, blah, blah. And it starts to read like that, and you don't want that. And so another way that, and how I was taught and how I like to teach folks is like, another way is to write your literature review is by theme. What this requires you to do though, when you write them by theme, is to really understand what that conversation has been, and then to pull out the key components of the conversation to really talk about. And just to give an example, right? In my dissertation, I looked at Black male, high achieving Black male students at a historically Black college or university. And so in my literature review, I had 3 overarching sections because I was writing about high achieving Black students. What I had to first do, because of the literature in my area, I had to first talk about just high achieving Black students generally, because I had to talk about that because there had been a lot written on in that area, and I was borrowing from that to build my argument. So first I had to kind of start there. And so that became the first section, the big section, right? Big, kind of big section. But within the literature on high achieving Black students, and particularly I focus on predominantly white institutions because more had been written in that space, even though I was looking at HBCUs. When I started to research, what I found is when I was reading those studies, I saw some trends across those studies. One, I saw that a lot of high achieving Black students were experiencing a lot of racial microaggressions. So I had a aspect about that. I had an aspect about how high achieving students, they formed like peer support groups. And like peer support was a sub theme within that higher theme about high achieving Black students at predominantly white institutions. And so I had a number of these. One was like about stereotype threat, because I read that in a number of articles. So these are things that I were pulling from the articles. That is another way to do it. But I think it does require you to really know the literature. All of them do. But I like the thematic way because you're able to tell a story versus just saying what other people have done. Like I was able to show like, all right, all this work that's been going around PWIs in my topic. And then I was able to say, you know what, while PWIs are important, there has to be a conversation about HBCUs because their environment is uniquely different. And then that helped me transition to the next big section was about high achieving Black students at historically Black colleges and universities. And then from there, I started to review that literature. It wasn't much at that particular time, but I reviewed all those key scholars in that particular area. And I talked about, I found out about how the campus environment was supportive, about how the faculty interactions were helpful for Black students at HBCUs. So again, that was a theme I was seeing across the studies. It wasn't just one particular study. I started to see that as commonalities across these studies, and I've kind of put it all together to tell a story. And then from there, I'm kind of outlining the whole literature review. We take it from there, and then I went deeper into finally positioning my study on Black men. Then I started to really combine like high achieving Black male students at HBCUs, and I kind of started to understand. I started to show like, hey, there's been this work on PWIs. That environment is not correct, and there's been work done on HBCUs, but there had been a lot about high achieving Black students at HBCUs, and there's already this deficit narrative about HBCUs generally, and I wanted to disrupt that with my dissertation. So that was the process I went through for my literature review, and that's the thought process you got to start thinking about. Is like, if I start my study macro, what does it look like, and then how do I craft an argument in my literature review that brings me right into my dissertation topic? I promise you, y'all, if y'all can do that, y'all will be fine. No faculty member will have an issue. So. And that will be how you can structure and arrange your literature review. Again, I do it by theme. I like that process a little bit better, but definitely you can do it by variable if you're doing a quantitative study. that works as well. You could do it by topic, again, just topic broadly, and work it that way. But for me, it made sense to do it by theme because it was very similar to analyzing qualitative data, and I was very familiar with that process, so it made sense to me. And Tequila, feel free to let me know if you have a follow-up question that if you need any more insight. And again, I hope that was helpful. Let me know so far if this is resonating with you. And again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments on whatever platform you are watching this on. I'll be sure to answer those questions. And again, for those just tuning in, this is Dissertation Office Hours, and we're talking about all the questions that folks have about literature reviews. And this episode of Office Hours is sponsored by the Dissertation Velocity Group Coaching Program. It is a 4-month dissertation coaching experience with the goal of helping you, the doctoral student, get to your proposal defense or your final defense if you already passed proposal defense in the next 4 months. So if you're looking to fast track the dissertation, what I want you to do is visit www.velocitydissertation.com to apply for the Velocity Group Coaching Program. And so with that, I'm going to look for other questions. And I've had a couple other questions that were submitted. I want to talk about those that I often get as well. Another question I get quite often is folks say, my topic is so specific that I can't find anything written on it. How could I ever write a literature review? And here's what I found that folks kind of think wrong about this. I honestly say, despite what faculty may tell you, there are going to be some faculty that say like, hey, if it's not studied, don't do it. For me as a researcher, if it's not studied, I love that. That means I got my own lane, I got my own opportunity. So I'm going to explore that, and I want to stay on that topic because there's an opportunity to fill the gap. Just imagine in our previous example, right, about the conversation and you showing up to the party. Imagine before in our previous example, there was 5 or 6 people, but now there's only 1 or 2 people. You know, that makes it for a better time for you to actually explore something and it contributes to the conversation quicker because you don't have so many people talking at once. And so I think it's a great opportunity. And how I would think about it when you're considering, should I explore a topic that's under research? Think about it like Uber. You know, before Uber, let's say 10 years ago, right? There would be no way that folks would get in a car with a stranger and have them take them somewhere. People thought you were crazy. You know, taxi was the only thing that we knew. That was the only conversation going on was about taxis. But now Uber's figured out a way to grow and scale their company. And now they've actually, you know, created their own category in ride sharing. Like literally, this was something that didn't exist, but Uber found a way to kind of position themselves, and now it's its own category. You got Lyft and other companies that have kind of joined that space. You're doing the same thing with your research, and so you can't be scared of that. It takes a lot of initiative to really do it, but I think in the long run, you will really find and really have a great opportunity when you do it the right way. And here's what I see a lot of you all doing. And if this is you, let me know because I know it's somebody that's watching today. What a lot of folks do when they don't have something written, I often find, and they say, I can't find anything. And then I bring them up on Google Scholar just to kind of show them how to search. And a lot of times I say, what are you searching for? And then they'll be so specific. They'll be like, let's say, for instance, I don't know, Black men in nursing in ICU at, public hospital, let's say, for instance. They'll be so specific. But what I say is that if there's not much written on your topic, you got to take a step back because what's probably going to end up happening is that if there's not a lot written on your topic, you're going to be borrowing from another body of work. But it takes for you to take a step back to kind of see what are the bodies of work that I got to combine in order to write about my topic. And just to give you all an example, I was writing a study about school district human resource officers and their perspectives on diversifying the teacher workforce. So I wanted to write about HR folks and what their thoughts were about hiring, Black and brown teachers. But what I ended up noticing is that when I looked at the literature on diversifying the teacher workforce, that literature didn't talk about hiring that much. It was like kind of like an afterthought. And then when I went to the literature about teacher hiring, they didn't really talk about hiring Black teachers. So it wasn't a lot, those two, they really weren't talking to each other. And then what I found I was thinking about was like, it's not just hiring, right? It's about the approach to hiring. And then I started reading in psychology and I started looking at intuition and this idea that, folks have intuitive hunches about hiring decisions. And so I started reading that literature, and intuition never talked about hiring with teachers. They talked about hiring in business and all these other places, but they never talked about education. So in this study, I combined all 3 of those areas. And so my literature review, I had to touch on diversifying the teacher workforce, I had to touch on, principal and school district hiring. And then I had to touch on intuition. And I had to point out the gaps in all three of those bodies of work and how my study was going to contribute. And again, my study is one of the few that have been written on HR, and particularly empirical study that looked at HR and their hiring practices in schools. So again, these are opportunity. And then what becomes very interesting is like, I'm not an intuition scholar, but the top scholar in intuition, he actually now cites my work in his work. So it's interesting. When you join the conversation, people pick up your work and bring it with them. And so it's an opportunity that you all have and you all are trying to do. So when you have a topic that's not a lot written on it, be okay with that. It's not anything wrong. It's just an opportunity. And I think you definitely want to take it. And then lastly, if you have trouble with searching, go ahead and use your school librarian. Like, they're an untapped resource. People don't use them as often as they should. They know everything. They know all the search terms. They know how to, all the queries. Like, they know everything. And I swear, I stayed talking to my research librarian at any university I've ever been at, because they have been so helpful for me to find literature. So if you say you can't find literature, talk to the librarian. They're going to help you search and think about your search a little differently than probably what you're thinking about it right now. And again, I hope that was helpful, because I know a lot of folks who are kind of stuck there and trying to figure out what to do. And shout out, we have TNG Mills Green. Good to see you. Thank you for dropping in. And again, if you're watching this, go ahead and share this with somebody who might need this. Share it on your timeline, wherever you are, so we get more people to tune in. Because again, a lot of folks are writing literature review struggling, and I don't want you all to struggle, because there's no need. And this is holding up you all from finishing your proposals. So we definitely want you all to get through. So I have two more questions that were pre-submitted, and then we'll just open it up. The next question I got from folks is that they said, there's so much literature. It's kind of the opposite, right? There's so much literature. How do I keep this organized? And I will say that there are a number of citation management systems on the market that you can input the data from your articles, so that you can keep your reference list in check and all those things. Maybe one of them will sponsor us at some point. Somebody from Mendeley, Zotero, EndNote, y'all in here. We love a sponsor. We'll definitely put your logo in here, right? And so one of these, there are a number of companies on the market, and so you can use them, right? They work. My folks in the Velocity Coaching Program, I joke about this all the time. I just make jokes with them, but I don't like any of the softwares. And Dr. Vrell and I, my coach, Dr. Vrell and I, we always get into it because she always you need to hurry up and kind of get on this technology wave. And I'm a little old school on this part. So I just find whatever works for you. Like for me, what works, I keep a long reference list that I have, and then I just pull the ones that I cite that I need. But you can definitely do this with technology. It's definitely quicker. It's just I like my style, and it's worked. I've been pretty productive as a researcher over these years, last 6 years. So it's worked. So I don't want to fix what's not broken. But what you also need is not only a system to organize your citations, but then you got to start thinking about what's your system to manage the information that you're getting from the articles. Because it's one thing to manage the citations, but a lot of you are struggling with, how do I remember what's been written in these articles? Because every time I go to sit down and write, I got to go back and read because I don't remember what they said. So in our program, in the Velocity Group Coaching Program, what we do is we teach a specific literature review management system that allows you to extract all the information that you need in order to easily see the trends in the literature, so that you can start to put together your literature review really easily. And it becomes so easy, the system that we teach, because you start to see it. It becomes in plain sight, the themes. It gets really easy. But you got to figure out the way that you need to do it. And if you feel like you need support and further support to do this and get help, I would just definitely welcome you to apply for the Velocity Group Coaching Program. And I'll share the information in a little bit, where we definitely help kind of support you and give you kind of the guide step by step on how to do it. But you all need some type of system to keep organized ASAP. If you don't got it, you definitely need to do it now. And again, thank you all who have been tuning in. This episode is sponsored by the Dissertation Velocity Coaching Program. It is a 4-month doctoral student coaching experience with the goal of helping you, the doctoral student, get to your dissertation proposal or your final defense in the next 4 months. And I know a lot of y'all think, how can I do that? When you join Done Dissertation, our Velocity Group Coaching Program, our goal is to accelerate you through this process and have a proven system that gets doctoral students done. So if you're interested in learning more and working with us, visit www.velocitydissertation.com, where you can learn more about the program and apply. Shout out to everybody who has been tuning in so far. And Tequila, I see you got a question about your topic being too general. So I'm going to bring that up. We can talk through that real quick. And so Tequila has a great kind of comment question here is that, I think my topic's too general, and you're looking at how high school climate influences student motivation from the perception of high school students in Mississippi. I don't think that's necessarily too general. I'm assuming you're doing a quantitative study, if I'm understanding this right. So you have to give me a little more information so I can better assist. I don't think this is too general right now, unless there was something specific around school climate that you wanted to know more about. I've had some students that do school climate stuff, so I'm not like an expert in that particular area, but there's a number of categories that kind of comprise school climate. So something as simple as like student teacher interaction. So if that was something you wanted to do, then you could be more specific, like how does student teacher interaction influence student motivation? But again, that's just something you got to think about from your topic. But right now, I don't see it as too broad. But again, give me a little more insight, and then I can better support you. But that's a great question. And things to think about. Those are the things we got to start thinking about early and often, so that you can just get through this process and don't let this thing hang you up. And the last question I have from folks that had submitted things about what they were interested in learning more about, and it kind of comes down to this. I get the question like, every time I sit down and write, I just don't know where to start. What should I do? And I know a lot of folks, they've organized their literature, they feel good, and then when they go to sit down and type, they're looking at that screen and figuring out, I don't know what to do right now. The ideas are gone. I don't know how to approach this. And here's a couple of things that I see a lot of folks do. First things first is that what I describe as, you have to first understand, are you in the creation mode or in the producer mode? So for me, my argument, my belief in our Dissertation, philosophy is that, writers go into two categories. You're writing as a creator or you're writing as a producer. When you're the creator, think about yourself as the artist. The example I usually give is Michael Jackson as the artist and Quincy Jones as the producer. But you can think about it as Beyonce the artist and say The Dream as the producer, right? Because he writes a lot of her songs and produces a lot of her records. When Beyonce is creating or Michael's creating, they're just in the booth singing and trying to get the notes out and doing the work, right? They're not concerned about it being perfect when they're first starting out. They're just trying to create and develop the concept, develop the idea. That's essentially at times when you're sitting down to write, you should be in creation mode. At other times as a writer, you're going to be in producer mode. And what producer mode looks like is, really editing what's going on. It looks like moving things around. And the idea around like a artist, right? They may sing that, lyric 10 times to get it right. On the 10th time they got it right. And that's going to be the take that we keep. That's when you're in production mode. What a lot of you are doing is when you go to sit down to write, a lot of you all are trying to produce your research when you should be creating. And it's holding you up. And here's how you're in the producing mode when you should be creating. You sit down to at the desk. You may review something that you worked on previously. And then what ends up happening is that you spend the whole writing session going back and editing the last 3 pages you wrote yesterday or a couple days ago. And then you look up and you are burnt out because you start telling yourself, I hate what I wrote. This makes no sense. My chair's not going to like this. And then you start doing all this negative self-talk, and it's going to take you right out of the writing process, and then you're done. Happens all the time. And then you look up and you get mad because you spent 45 minutes, you got nothing accomplished. And then you say, I got nothing accomplished. I'm not going to finish this. Why even bother? And it's like this spiraling cycle that happens. It happens all the time. I see people go through it all the time. It's not uncommon. So definitely know what you're experiencing is not uncommon. But what I want you to start doing is that I actually want you to, when you go to sit down to write, all you're doing is creating. You got to get the thoughts out of your head onto the paper, because we can't produce anything that's not created. If you kind of take my analogy that way, you got to be in the creation mode at times. And so what I typically do is a couple of things. One is that you got to stop reading, because what a lot of you all are doing is that when you sit down to write, the first thing you're doing, instead of relying on your own thoughts and your knowledge, you're immediately pulling up that PDF and pulling up on another screen, or trying to multi-screen your laptop to like have your PDF on one side and you're writing on the other, and you're reading and going back and forth, and it's slowing you down. What you want to start doing is stop the reading. But again, this requires you to actually have understood what the literature has been talking about. So if you have not been reading, you don't know who the key scholars are, you don't know what their contributions have been, and you don't know how your dissertation is making a contribution, you need to read all together, because it doesn't matter what you write, it's not going to be well informed because you haven't read enough. But at some point, you have been well informed as a scholar. You got to sit down and write, and you got to stop the reading. And this is why we teach a particular management system for literature in the Velocity Group Coaching Program, to help you as a doc student to really, separate the creation from the producing mode. And I find a lot of folks get stuck at that point. And again, I find that, a lot of folks read because it's a crutch from writing. And I will say is that the longer you keep reading as your crutch, you will crutch your way through the dissertation process. And what that looks like, you're going to spend a whole bunch of time, a whole bunch of money, and don't have anything to show for it. And you're going to be frustrated because every event, year after year, that you go to, your family members are going to keep asking, when are you going to write that big book? Are you going to be done this year? When are you going to be done? And you're going to roll your eyes and be upset and frustrated. So just take it from me. You got to be times where you just take off the crutch, throw the crutch away of reading. You got to sit down and write, because the ideas are coming from you at some point that are informed by the literature, but they're going to come out of your head, and you're going to type what you need to type. So you got to get in that mode. And then lastly, this part will free some people, is that when I write out of order. And so in my mind, it doesn't matter how it gets created. As long as the final product is produced, who cares? And so what I typically do is when I write a literature review or any paper, I outline the paper in headers. That works for me. Some of you are more detailed, and you can go very granular if you want, where you just turn your outline into sentences. I go big headers that I want to cover in each of the sections. So I might have my overarching header for the section, and then my subheaders things I want to talk about. I do that, and then every time I sit down to write, I look at what's left that I need to create, and I go to the one that I think I can write the easiest. And that saves me from spending a lot of time and being frustrated. So whatever comes easiest, I write that day, because I like a win. The more wins you get, the better the better you feel, and the better you feel, the more likely you are to write. And the more likely you are to write, the more you will write, and the more you write, the more likely you will come back to writing. So it's this process. So just like you would unravel, what I got to start getting you all to do, and what we do in the Velocity Group Coaching Program, is to help you fast track and start getting into this momentum of writing, and getting, building up that muscle. And once you build a muscle, you're like, oh, I can do more reps. And then when you do more reps, you're like, I'm getting stronger. And as you're getting stronger, I can do more reps. It's this process, and we're going to propel you forward. But a lot of you all, first things first, don't get started. So that's a big issue. So a lot of you all are trying to think through, how do I do all this writing? And you just won't even get started because you're afraid. You're afraid that the fact that this won't be good enough to, for your advisor or to you. You all have high expectations for yourself. And so I want you all to start thinking about just writing out of order, write what comes easiest, because what will happen is, and think about it like this, right? Your favorite song, right? That's on the radio right now. Little do you know that song probably took 45 takes to get right. But you don't care, because you heard the final product. And with your chair, they won't see the 20 revisions you had to do when you're moving things around. And, all they will see is the final product. So it doesn't matter how it gets done. It just has to get done. And the first part is that you have to start. A lot of you all have been so caught up in your head that you don't start, and that will keep you from getting this process done with, for sure. And so with that, those were the main questions that that folks had kind of submitted, and I've seen over the course of time working with you all through these office hours, as well as with my clients. And again, I want to say thank you all so much. Again, and feel free to drop your questions in. I'll be glad to take whatever questions you all might have. And again, this episode was sponsored by the Velocity Group Coaching Program. So if you're looking to get support and you want to learn our proof of strategy to write your literature review and to get through the dissertation process, I invite you to apply to the Velocity Group Coaching Program at www.velocitydissertation.com. We do have a couple slots remaining in our cohort, so we would love for you to join so we can help you get your dissertation done. And the goal over the course of the next 4 months is to help you, if you're actually at the proposal phase, to get to the proposal defense, or if you're past proposal defense, is to help you write and defend your dissertation at the end of those 4 months. And shout out to one of my clients who started with us, and it's crazy, y'all. This is how the process works. She started with us this is October. She started with us in August, passed the proposal defense, had collected data, and was stuck with writing. And literally came in, and because of the process and how we help kind of propel you along, literally wrote, and her dissertation had a lot of findings chapters, and wrote it had 9 chapters total. So wrote 6 chapters in the last 2 months. And is about to defend in 2 weeks now. Just got their date. Like that, it doesn't take a long time, y'all, but you have to be committed and willing to do the work. You have to be willing to invest in yourself, because our program is definitely indeed a mid 4-figure investment. So it's definitely an investment in yourself to get done, but we're helping fast track the process. And then it's definitely a commitment that you will make this a priority, because when you make the dissertation priority, you will get done quickly. And so we got a couple questions from folks. And shout out to, is it Tura? She says that these analogies are so helpful and really help put things in perspective. Well, I'm glad it's helpful, because as a teacher, I'm always trying to figure out, how do I break down these things that are very abstract, and professors teach them very abstractly. How do I make them practical? And so, again, you all are learning from years of heartache that I've had to go through as a writer, as a struggling writer who figured it out and, became a really good writer and really strong writer and been really active as a scholar. And you all learning from the things that I've messed up on. You all learning to fast track. And so Mercy on Instagram says, how do you modify your literature review for your dissertation in a published review article? It depends on, so there's a number of ways, right? So typically what you can do, it depends on how verbatim or which one's published first. I think that's always a piece too, right? Because if the literature review is published first, I think it becomes really, or if your dissertation's out first, right? I think it becomes really hard to then sometimes to pull the whole literature review verbatim and put it into a journal article. It comes a little harder. But what I would say, if you had to modify without knowing more, Mercy, and we could jump on Instagram in a second if you want to pop up and give more clarity to your question. What I would suggest is that first things first is you typically will have like a methods section. If it's more of like an integrative literature review where they have like a methods to it, that could be a route to modify. Sometimes the length, like dissertation literature reviews are written for dissertations, right? And journal articles are written for journal articles. So like a literature review for a journal article probably be very much shorter than what you'd have for your dissertation. I'm just thinking about literature reviews that I published. I had one published in 2018. I think the page requirement was like 25 pages total. So that includes an introduction, that includes my discussion of the methods, the literature review analysis itself, a discussion section, implications, and conclusion. I had 23 pages. Whereas like in a literature review I'll write for my dissertation would have been like, that literature review could have been easily 35 to 40 pages. So again, they each have their own purpose. So you got to first figure out, where am I publishing? What is their requirement? And then what I would do too to modify is that I would find a sample journal article in that publication. That would be my model. I would emulate that same model and have my information, but similar model, looking at how long is the introduction structured, how long is the, methods, how long is the literature review, how many themes, like all those things. I'm following that to a T, and that usually will get you and get that literature review published. So again, if you have a follow-up question, I hope that was helpful. Oh, perfect. I'm glad that worked for you. And Ken, you said that, I see Ken says my literature review is structured chronologically. You could do that too. Again, it depends on your area. Like if there's a lot written, sometimes you have to do it that way, because you can say like over the course of time, there have been certain arguments that have happened in my topic over a period of time. And so sometimes you might say in the 1950s, the argument was this, the 60s, it was this, you can kind of show it that way, but still giving and inserting like a scholarly conversation, not just what everybody did, but what has been the themes that kind of cut across those papers. All right, y'all. We've been going at this for about 45 minutes. So what questions do you all have? Hey, Shelby, shout out to you. What's going on? What questions do you all have about the literature review? I'll stay on for a couple more minutes if there are any questions. And again, I want to say thank you so much for folks who have been tuning in. Please share this out with folks who might need help. Share it on your timeline, wherever you are, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. If you're on YouTube, definitely give us a follow. We definitely appreciate that. And again, this episode of Done Dissertation Office Hours is sponsored by the Velocity Group Coaching Program. It is a 4-month coaching experience with the goal to help you, the doctoral student, write your dissertation proposal and get it ready for defense, or defend your final dissertation over the next 4 months. So if you're looking to fast track the dissertation process and get done, make sure that you visit www.velocitydissertation.com to apply for the program and learn more about what we do. Because y'all about to see, we got a couple folks getting ready to defend in like the next month. 2 that are getting, like I said, I talked about one today. We got another one coming up right behind. Like, y'all, it's about to be on. Like, we're getting folks out, and you all sitting there trying to figure out what to do, struggling, when you all can get some support and get through the process. So we definitely want to help you get to where you want to go. So again, any other questions about the literature review, please let me know. I'll stay on for a couple more minutes. And if something resonated with you, I would love to hear what insight that you took from today, or what's something that you're going to apply tomorrow when you go to sit down and write. because I'm all about application, right? I'm not just talking and sharing these things just to share. I want to share it with you all so you all can use it and do something with it. So again, that is the key. That's the difference between people who finish and those who stay ABD. If you want to stay ABD, you just stay inactive. If you want to be, get this doctorate and dissertation done, then start having some momentum and start actually doing the work. And again, if you need help doing it, we'd be happy to support you doing so. Other questions and any takeaways from today's conversation? And while that's going on, thank you to everybody who's been tuning in. Thanks to Ken, Tequila, folks have been dropping comments. Tangi, Tura. Let's see on Instagram. Mercy, appreciate you. Renee, it's a breezy way. I'm not sure what that is, but you let me know your name. Shout out to Dr. Varela who was tuning in. Good to see everybody jumping on. Other questions folks got about the literature review? All right, good people. I don't see anything right now. I know we'll have a slight delay, so I just want to give folks a second. But again, nothing that I see. And I'm so happy that you all stayed on and tuned in with me. I really appreciate you all support. Share this out with friends. Follow us on all the social media platforms so you can stay up to date with us. And again, don't let time pass you by because you feel like you want to do it yourself. Like doing it yourself and being stuck makes absolutely no sense when you get help from folks who know the process and have a proven method. And you can imagine if we're doing this, what I provide for you here, imagine what we do in our programs. It's way better than just this. Like y'all don't even know. So y'all definitely need to jump on and become part of the Done Dissertation family and work with us in our Velocity coaching program. And what you have to do is visit www.velocitydissertation.com to apply for the program. In addition, if you want us to come to your university, I'd be happy to do workshops and things at your university. Shoot me a message. We can coordinate with your program director at your university and your doctoral program for me to come out and do a workshop with you all to make sure that you all get the support that you need to get through the dissertation process ASAP. So with that, y'all, I hope you all have a great, great evening. And I look forward to seeing you all next time on Done Dissertation Office Hours. Take care, everybody, and have a great